Curious George walks the pets. The man with the yellow hat was busy putting film in his camera. George sat and looked out the window. Their neighbor, Mr. Nelson, passed by. He was walking his dog, Andy. Sometimes Mr. Nelson had to run when Andy pulled him. What would it be like to walk a pet? George was curious. He waited until Mr. Nelson and his dog were back home. Then he went over to their house and rang the doorbell. Mr. Nelson didn't answer it, but the door was open, so George went in. Andy's leash was hanging on a hook. George tried to put it on him, but Andy leaped away. Then George discovered Mr. Nelson's other pets. He had a cat, a canary in a cage, and a goldfish in a bowl. Could George take all of them for a walk? He tried to put the leash on the cat, but she meowed and ran away. Next, George opened the bird cage, but the bird flew away. The cat jumped after the bird. Andy chased the cat. The bird flew around in circles, and the goldfish splashed in its bowl. What excitement! Suddenly, Mr. Nelson rushed in. "What's going on?" he yelled. George dropped the leash and ran out of the house. Now he was safe. Mr. Nelson tried to calm down his pets. He made Andy lie down. He patted the cat, put the bird back in its cage, and fed the goldfish. Then he went back to the kitchen. The coast was clear. George sneaked back to watch the pets. He was sure they would all like to go for a walk. How could George put a leash on a bird or a goldfish? Suddenly, George knew what to do. He ran back home, got his little red wagon, and pulled it over to Mr. Nelson's house. Then he put the bird cage in the wagon. Then he put the goldfish bowl next to it. Then he picked up the cat and put it in the wagon. But the cat jumped out when Andy came over to see what was going on. Quickly, George hooked the leash to the dog's collar. Then he tied the other end to the wagon. Andy could help him pull. Finally, they were ready, and off they went. The cat followed them. Now, George was walking all the pets down Garden Street. At the first house, Mrs. James' dog ran out and trotted behind the wagon. Then Mary O'Brien's cat fell in line, too. In no time, Mr. Klein's poodle, Mr. Finelli's beagle, Dr. Barnes' collie, and all the other pets in the neighborhood were following George. What a parade! But the neighbors didn't think so. Mr. Nelson came running after them. So did Mary O'Brien and Dr. Barnes and Mr. Klein and Mrs. Finelli. "Stop! Stop!" they shouted angrily. "What are you doing with our pets? Bring them back." George was scared. What could he do now? "Wait a minute," called Mrs. James from her doorway. "Why are you angry with him? George is our pet walker. He can be a great help to us." "Gee, that's right," said Mary O'Brien. "I've read about pet walkers, but I never thought we could have one on Garden Street." "George is doing a good job, too," said Dr. Barnes. "The pets are really behaving." "A pet walker could save me a lot of time," said Mr. Klein. Just then, the man with the yellow hat came running over. "Hold still, everybody," he shouted. "I want to take a picture. Everybody smile." And so they did.